Shane was in college 25 years ago when his teacher asked the class to participate in a memory and visualization exercise. The teacher asked them to shut their eyes and picture a tree. Shane said, "I closed my eyes and thought of a tree, but I did not see a tree in my mind. As usual, I just saw complete darkness with a very vague thought of a tree somewhere in the distance of my mind." The next exercise the teacher asked them to do was to shut their eyes and visualize a story he narrated, and then answer questions related to the story with their eyes still shut. As he struggled with this task, Shane wrote that his classmates were answering with much confidence and assurity. Shane could not see any pictures in his mind. It eventually dawned on him that nobody else had problems with visual imagination. He said he had image-free imagination, or a blind mind's eye. Shane was describing his experience in his memoir titled Aphantasia and Beyond. Hello, I'm Ibrahim Imam and welcome to another episode of the Neurology Lounge podcast, in which we'll be exploring the intriguing phenomenon of aphantasia. Unlike people without aphantasia, what Shane sees when he shuts his eyes is darkness. Aphantasia affects 2 to 3% of people, and it is the inability to generate visual imagery. It is therefore perhaps understandable that people with aphantasia gravitate towards scientific and mathematical occupations rather than creative and artistic ones. The impairment of imagination in aphantasia is also illustrated by Jeffrey Lucero in his book titled Aphantasia, Blind in the Mind. He wrote that I can't see images in my mind. I can't see the pictures of my kids or recall the images of important moments in my life, like their births. He added that I can't see the beach, the sunrise or sunset, and I certainly can't see myself pitching in the mound. One can only imagine how disturbing it must be for someone to discover that they have aphantasia. Take the case of Charlotte Langley as an example. Writing in her book titled Aphantasia Club, she narrated what it felt like thinking that she was normal, only to realize that she didn't possess any superpower, that everything is dark when she shuts her eyes. She wrote that I tried so many times to see an apple, a horse, or a beach behind my eyelids, but not once has anything other than black materialized in my head. Yet, she said, I know what all these objects, places, or animals look like, and I can describe them perfectly with words. The time she discovered that she had aphantasia was an emotionally challenging one for Langley. She said, when I found out, at first I was confused, then sad, angry, then fascinated, surprised, and frustrated. And eventually she said she just felt lonely and regretful. She said, I saw clues of missed opportunities everywhere. I spent days thinking I was missing something. I felt like a mortal in a superhero world. I ended up being angry. Noting that 98% of the world's population is phantasic, she contrasted her inabilities to their abilities. For example, she said phantasics see an apple in their mind when asked to picture one, can meditate by imagining themselves on a beach, can count sheep to fall asleep, and have the ability to create mental images in their mind's eye. She further regretted that if I wasn't aphantasic, I could see my ideas in my mind as templates before drawing them. I could see imaginary scenarios in my mind and then write them down on paper. I could daydream to help reassure myself against anxiety. I could replay my memories to keep them in my mind a little longer. Langley, however, overcame her initial regrets and she decided to channel her emotions into a goal, the search of knowledge about the condition. She remarked that the emotion that dominates my interest in aphantasia is now fascination. In his book titled Discover the Fascinating World of Aphantasia, Kevin Lowe explored the different routes that bring people to discovering that they have aphantasia. Lowe wrote that some individuals with aphantasia may not realize that they have the condition until they are asked to visualize something and are unable to do so. Others, he said, may become aware of their aphantasia when they struggle with tasks that involve visualization, such as finding directions or recalling memories. Lowe also wrote of how people with aphantasia apply alternative strategies to cope with their inability to visualize, and this often predates their discovery that they have the condition. For example, he said, they may have always relied on verbal or written communication rather than visualization, or they may have developed strong memory skills to compensate for their inability to visualize memories. Langley corroborated this in her survey of 300 aphantasics, through which she found that the majority recall their memories through facts and lists of facts. What is the history of our understanding of aphantasia? Shane wrote that this can be traced back to Sir Francis Galton, who first described it in 1880. Shane, however, said that this never gained traction and was largely ignored for over a century. He explained that the main reason that aphantasia has gone unknown and unstudied for so long is that everyone just assumes that everybody is having the same experience in their minds. It was not until 2015 that Shane said the study of the subject was resuscitated. And this was done by cognitive neurologist Adam Zeman, who coined the name aphantasia. Zeman, in his foreword to the book titled Aphantasia, Experiences, Perceptions and Insights, which was written by aphantasic Alan Kendall, described how he came up with the catchy name aphantasia. He recalled sitting in a London cafe with David, an old university friend who has a classical background. Zeman said, I had asked him to help me coin a term to describe a novel phenomenon, the lifelong lack of the mind's eye. David hearkened to ancient Athens and to Aristotle, who had referred to the mind's eye as phantasia. Zeman said they decided to give lack of the mind's eye the name aphantasia, explaining that the A denoted absence. Aphantasia may have a familial or genetic basis, and this is illustrated by Shane, whose daughter also has aphantasia. It, however, has a much wider list of acquired causes, which include stroke, hypoxic brain injury, which is injury due to lack of oxygen, and even functional without any structural cause. Although the lack of visual imagery defines aphantasia, the impaired ability extends beyond vision to include the other senses. For example, Shane wrote that he lacked the ability to hear sounds in his mind as other people can. Shane went further to assert that nobody he knows with aphantasia can imagine the other senses of smell, taste, and touch. Similarly, Langley had difficulties with more than just visual imagination. She said aphantasia also impairs the mental perception of our other four senses. For her, she said, creating a melody from scratch had always been impossible because repeating an existing one was already unfeasible. Langley's thinking is also affected by aphantasia. She wrote that her thoughts are just an inexplicable stream of ideas, words, and sometimes phrases that my inner monologue pronounces in my head, but pictures are never part of it. An impairment of memory also seems to accompany aphantasia. For example, Langlais said, "My memories are just facts and lists of facts, concepts, dates, descriptions that I know happened." She added that, "I have experienced wonderful things in my life, but sometimes I have trouble placing them back on a timeliness and remembering them without the help of photographs." Shane's aphantasia also affects his memory. Illustrating this, he said that it is hard for him to retain specific details for very long in many instances because he tends to rapidly forget such details as names and numbers. Kendall also wrote of how his aphantasia impairs his ability to recall music, smells, and feelings. It is therefore not surprising that people with aphantasia have difficulties keeping up with their education right from childhood. For example, Alan Kendall wrote of struggling and getting stressed with school, learning, and education generally. Other difficulties associated with aphantasia include impaired recognition of faces, also called prosopagnosia, low sensory sensitivity, poor quality of dreams, and a dampened emotional response to fearful stories. But despite the challenges posed by aphantasia, Kendall maintained that the condition does not restrict people from achieving their life ambitions. Indeed, he argued that aphantasia is a condition that has rarely held people back, and that there seems to be, on the whole, few, if any, limitations in life for people with aphantasia. The extent to which each person is affected by aphantasia, however, varies, and this is why Kendall referred to it as a spectrum condition. Langlais supported this view when she pointed out that even those without aphantasia do not have the same ability to visualize images in their head. She said, "Some people visualize them in a very precise and clear way, while others see them blurred and fleeting. Some people only see the outlines, and for others it is only the colors." This is why she argued that even the boundaries of aphantasia are not fixed. Despite the evident disadvantages of aphantasia, Shane, Langlais, and Kendall all wrote of the benefits that aphantasia has conferred on them. For example, Shane wrote that aphantasia has helped him to understand who he is, how he learns, how he communicates, how he creates, and how he interacts with others. Furthermore, he said, "Since my mind's eye is always quiet and dark, it's easy for me to close my eyes and relax." Langlais also explored what she said were the advantages of having aphantasia. For example, she said having aphantasia allows you not to visually relive your most painful memories, not to see your demons, not to face your fears in a brutal and realistic way. She added that having aphantasia allows you to focus more on the present. She further explained that when the past seems to be blurred and the future is not imaginable, then the present is the only time left in which to immerse yourself deeply. Kendall also wrote of how people with aphantasia may be better at remembering facts than those with preserved imaginations. To explore aphantasia further, I will be talking to Joanne Hedger, author of Aphantasia, Journeying Through Mind Blindness and Embracing Our Unique Neurodiversity with Passion and Purpose. And this will be in the next podcast. Thank you very much for listening or watching this podcast in which we started our exploration of aphantasia. If you found the podcast enlightening, you might consider subscribing to the Neuro Checklist website, which has more information on aphantasia. You may also consider having a look at my book titled Surfing the Brain for a layperson's perspective of many neurological topics. And why not subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube channels to ensure that you don't miss the next episode in conversation with Joanne Hedger. Do join me then.